So I'm going to begin by a little bit of a framing exercise. We've been working on this teacher leadership project for nearly a year and a half, nearly 2 years now, and with planning having taken place before that. And Carol and her team, who are going to be speaking to us soon, have been working on framing the research part of the project. But the question still arises, why the tilt to formative assessment? So what is it about formative assessment that has particularly captured us at this particular time in history? Now, we've come out of the pandemic at a time where the only assessment that many students had was formative, or formative in terms of the cycles that took place between teacher and student. But we've been working in an international environment for many years now, where summative assessment and standardized assessments have, we believe, had an undue influence on the education of students. Now, this project is a partnership project with the Jacobs Foundation, whose vision and stated goal is to improve the primary school education of every child. So the work in this project has been focused on primary school children in state schools in 7 countries. And the countries that we've been working in will be elucidated by Danielle and her team. I am going to talk about a couple of the countries today in the intro, but I'm not going to cover every country. I will acknowledge that on the panel, we have Brazil represented, we have Côte d'Ivoire represented, and we have Korea represented. And we also have inputs from other members, which will clarify the learning framework and how the framework actually operates. In terms of what's happening in the project, we believe that we're engaged in a sort of pedagogical activism, where teachers are involved in developing learning loops with the children in their class, with the support of facilitators who direct their learning. And we have 1 or 2 such facilitators with us here today, and they will be explaining how that goes. And they do it within a context of our teacher unions leading the conversation at the national level around formative assessment. So what have we learned so far, and how are we able to learn from each other? Well, we've been through a couple of explanations around the work we've been doing. We had a session in Porto, which was hosted by the Aga Khan Foundation, who are also working within the Jacobs work, and who have many things in common with us in terms of their focus around teaching and learning. And we talked there with participants from Brazil and from Switzerland around some of these pedagogical questions. And what's been interesting to me as I've gone round those countries and had a look at how things are operating at the national level is the difference in the discussion as it takes place on the ground. So we had cantons in Switzerland, where in one canton, they're moving away from giving students any marks at all. They are moving towards describing only what the student can say and what the student can do, and are finding a language to talk to parents around that. To situation where we have 6-point scales, 10-point scales, everything in between. And for us, the form of assessment is not the crucial thing. The crucial thing is the relationship between the teacher and the student in the conversation they're having around the learning. We had a very powerful meeting in Brasilia that was hosted by the president of CNTE, which gave us a very clear framing around the importance of formative assessment in that environment. And there, I noticed we have our Uruguayan colleagues on the webinar today. We had a presentation from our Uruguayan researcher, and there was a lot of talk in Latin America about the importance of a Latin American arrangement and understanding around the way formative assessment is operating. So we have many things surfacing in the experiences teachers have in their national settings and the way that they're framing the project. Where do we want to go with this next? We want every country in the EI family to have access to this work and to be able to access the learning and this way of working. And in order to explain that a little more clearly, I am going to pass to Danielle now, who is going to introduce the research team and take us through the perspective that they have over the international work that's going on. We have national researchers who contextualize the work in each country, because every country is different. And we know that formative assessment works in terms of the context that it fits within. So without further ado, we're very excited to have you all here and part of this discussion, because we believe that formative assessment can make a very large difference. So over to you now, Danielle. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Martin. And thank you all for being here today. I'm coming to you from Canada where it's morning, but I know it's a different time of day for all of you. So thanks for being here. We as an international research team are really excited to hear what's happening in some of the countries participating in the project, and also hear some of the questions from our participants today and experiences with formative assessment. I'll just give a brief overview of our agenda. Thanks, Carol. So we'll have this introduction piece, and then we'll hear from our keynote speaker, Dr. Carol Campbell, who's also our lead international researcher on the project. Then we'll move into panel discussions, where, as Martin mentioned, we have 4 country representatives who will be sharing some of their insights and experiences to date. So we have Côte d'Ivoire, Brazil, Uruguay, and South Korea represented. And then we'll move into some question and answer with our panelists and keynote. So you may have come to this session with questions, which is great, but as you're listening, you might have questions that arise. So please jot those down, and then we'll cue you to the to either ask those questions by raising your hand, as Martin mentioned, or putting them in the chat, and we'll get to as many questions as we possibly can during the session today, followed by a quick summary and close from Martin and me. Okay, thanks, Carol. You can move on. So our international research team is comprised of 4 members. So our lead researcher, as I mentioned, is Dr. Carol Campbell from the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education at the University of Toronto. And then we also have Professor Chris DeLuca from Queen's University, and myself also from Queen's University. Chris and I are both also members of Queen's Assessment Evaluation Group. So we're particularly excited to hear about this and be part of this project, focusing on formative assessment across many countries. And then we also have our research assistant, Mavis So, who's also part of OISE at the University of Toronto. And I'll say more about Carol before I introduce her. So this is just a graphic highlighting what Martin described. So our teacher-led learning circles project is funded by the Jacobs Foundation and led by Education International. And then we also have international facilitators led by HertzCam, who are working with the local facilitators and teacher union representatives to support the learning circles that are happening in each country. And then each country has at least an international researcher, if not multiple, who are also working to help facilitate those learning circles in their countries. We have 7 countries participating, which is very exciting. We have Brazil, Côte d'Ivoire, Ghana, Malaysia, South Korea, Switzerland, and Uruguay. So in each country, the learning circles are unfolding at different rates and in slightly different ways based on their unique context. And that's been an exciting thing for us to learn from as well. So how each country's context is impacting and influencing how the circles unfold and how formative assessment practices and teacher leadership are spreading in those country settings. And then, of course, we have the teacher-led learning circles, which are facilitated professional development and inquiry process for teacher leadership of formative assessment practices over the course of a school year. So we go to the next slide, we can see kind of the nested nature of the work. So at the international level, we have the Jacobs Foundation, Education International, ourselves as the international research team, and our international facilitators, which is HertzCam. And then at the national level, we have our national researchers, local union representatives, and local facilitators working across their countries with the learning circles. and then the classroom level where we have our teachers involved in the learning circles and working with students in their specific contexts. And our research team developed two broad questions and sub-questions to guide our work at the start of the project. And these, this is highlighted in our research framework, which Carol will mention. So in our first question, in the teacher-led learning circles, what promising teacher-led formative assessment practices were identified? And our second broad question, in the teacher-led learning circles, what professional learning and teacher leadership processes supported teachers' formative assessment practices? So these are the broad questions guiding our work as international researchers. And so we're collecting data to respond to those questions, and that will be part of our formal reporting at the end to Education International and the Jacobs Foundation. Okay. All right. So exciting. We're really pleased to have Dr. Carol Campbell here as our keynote speaker today. She'll speak briefly about our core international research findings in the project through our literature review and our preliminary data collection activities. For those of you who don't know Carol, she's a renowned education expert and our lead international researcher in the project. She's a professor of leadership and educational change at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education at the University of Toronto in Canada. Carol also serves in various advisory roles with government agencies and organizations, both in Canada and internationally. Carol's known for her commitment to combining research and practice-based evidence to develop professional capacity for educational improvement. As this slide highlights, her work focuses largely on supporting teachers' professional learning and leadership and on knowledge mobilization for educational improvement. Carol's contributions to the field are undeniable and have impacted countless students, educators, and systems around the world. On a personal note, I'm honored to call Carol a mentor, colleague, and friend. And please help me in welcoming Dr. Carol Campbell.
Thanks, Danielle, for that very generous welcome. Now I'm just getting my slides set up. Here we go. Thank you, Danielle. It's my absolute pleasure to be here, and I do want to thank Education International and Jacobs Foundation for the opportunity to be part of this really important work, as Martin said, pedagogical activism. We're delighted to be here. I'm only going to say a brief few words because I really want to honour the panel and the important work that you are doing in each of your countries and with classrooms and teachers in your spaces. I'm based in Canada. I'm currently in the UK en route to Wales, where I'll be talking about teaching and learning. And of course, this work will be part of what I'm sharing with people there in Wales as they think about the future of teaching and learning. So Danielle and Chris and I with Maeva are leading the overall international research team in collaboration with national researchers and national unions and teachers, as well as Education International, Hartscam and Jacobs. So I'm just going to paint the overall picture before we let our panelists talk about each context. We started with a literature review that is available for free from Education International on their website. So everything I'm about to say, you can access if you want to share it with your members or your colleagues and other teachers and researchers. So we're situating the teacher-led learning circles work in an understanding about teacher quality and teaching quality. We know within schools, the most important fact is the work that teachers do and the quality of their teaching. So supporting teachers in their teaching is absolutely essential. But this isn't about the heroic one teacher, because we have to think about the working context and the conditions that do or don't support teachers, and the important work that Education International and unions across the world are doing to advocate for teachers' working conditions. So as Greg Thompson has said, based on the global survey of teachers for Education International, the quality of an education system cannot exceed the extent to which it supports, sustains, and invests in the status of its teachers. And we think the teacher-led learning circles is one powerful example of how to support teachers and their development in order to support students and their learning. And then this project is absolutely about teacher leadership, and that's central to the work of HeartsCam, and I know David Frost is joined us today. So teacher leadership is a process of influence. It doesn't necessarily need to be a formal position. It can be about a teacher's informal leadership within and beyond their classroom. It requires collaboration and trust to have leadership not only with students, but with peers and sometimes to people in senior positions. And at its heart, teacher leadership is really about educational improvement and about students' learning. We also reviewed the literature on what is effective professional development, because not all professional development is effective. Effective professional development is linked to teachers' identified priorities, teacher voice, teacher choice, teacher agency. So teachers' priorities linked to their students' needs. What do teachers need to learn to support their students in their context? And this is integrated within the approach of the teacher-led learning circles, where teachers identify a priority that they'll work on and the formative assessment practices they want to take forward. There is no one size fits all to teacher development, and there should not be. It should be differentiated for teachers' values, experiences, and work. This has to resonate and connect. So part of the teacher-led learning circles process involves teacher reflection on their values, on their experiences, producing vignettes and evidence, and working on their own practice. Effective professional development provides useful research and practice-informed quality content. It might seem obvious, but there has to be really great content in professional development that is relevant. And that's why through the facilitated workshops, there's supports around teacher leadership, formative assessment, the work that's happening. And again, that is available to share. Effective professional development involves inquiry and learning and reflection, trying things out, teachers using their influence. So thinking about between the workshops, going back to your classroom, going back to your school, trying things out, sharing those practice and reflecting and adapting and improving them. It does require funding, time and expert resources, and that is a challenge around the world. But something like the teacher-led learning circles, where there is provision of funding and supports, is important. But obviously, as you know, Martin's dream that this gets spread across the world, we need to think about how to make this sustainable in a range of contexts and conditions. And leaders, if you're in a formal leadership position, you matter, because system leaders, school leaders, teacher leaders, union leaders, government leaders, your valuing and support of professional development and teachers matters. So we've looked at teacher leadership, quickly looked at professional development. That's involved in the design of the teacher-led learning circles, but this is specifically about formative assessment or assessment for learning. And what we know, and I want to acknowledge Professor Christoluca, who's part of the team, who's a real leader in this field, as well as Danielle. When we look across the research evidence, the importance of formative assessment includes clarifying learning goals and success criteria. Now, you might not call it that in your country. We've learned there's different terms in different contexts, but thinking about what are the goals to be achieved and how feedback can be provided to students to support their progress. A formative assessment involves engaging students in meaningful questioning and discussions, talking about their learning, reflecting on their learning, providing feedback. Peer and self-assessment, students learning to reflect on their own learning and to talk to their other students, their peers. And then monitoring progress through forms of feedback, and I'll say more about that. So, clarifying, sharing and co-constructing learning intentions. What are the goals? what does it mean to be successful, leveraging questions, engaging in self and peer assessment to support students in their own learning, and providing ongoing feedback. This is at the heart of the approaches to formative assessment in this project. And this involves questions for the learner, for their peers in their classrooms, and for the teachers. Where am I going? What's my learning and where am I going? How am I going? Or how am I doing? Engaging in discussion about their learning, using questions to provide reflection and feedback. And then where to next? Providing feedback to scaffold and support learning based on what students are flourishing with or struggling with. And gathering evidence in a range of ways. And this can be, for example, through a product, a piece of work in the classroom, or homework, or some other way of demonstrating a student's learning. It can be through observation of what's happening in a teacher's classroom. What are they seeing? Where are students doing well? Where do they need support? And it can be based on conversations, teacher to student or student to student. So we've also published the research framework, which guides the overall research design, and you'll hear from some of our national researchers who have adapted this to their specific context. But again, this is available from Education International if you want to see more. We've conducted the pre-survey, and obviously there'll then be a post-survey to see what changes happen over the lifetime of this project. It's focused on primary, as Martin said. Most of the teachers are actually with primary 3, just over 1/3. Almost a third have 21 to 30 students in their class, but as you will know, in some contexts there's a lot more, and not so many where there's a lot less. Over half are in an urban context, but we do also have rural and remote. And almost half do not have access to Wi-Fi or devices. So thinking about formative assessment without technology and with technology as appropriate. And then remember those 4 features of formative assessment that we know from research are powerful. We have embedded this into the survey and the design. And what we saw in the pre-survey is that a lot of work is already happening in classrooms that can be described as formative assessment. So in those first 3 categories, these practices are happening about 75% of the time. So of course, we're looking to see further growth and improvement. But the one that is happening less at the moment is self and peer assessment. And that's understandable. So it'll be interesting to see how that moves forward, not just teacher leadership, but student leadership of their learning. So now we're moving to what the Jacobs are calling a codification framework. What are we learning about good practices? What are we learning from practices that didn't work? So we can share a range of practices globally to support formative assessment. So we will be working with our national researchers who will be working with the teams in their countries to identify formative assessment practices that are being used. National researchers will be developing country reports, and then we'll be producing an overall report drawing on a wide range of evidence. So that's where we're up to. Happy to answer questions later and really looking forward to the panel discussion. So I think back over to you, Danielle.
Yes, thank you, Carol. That was wonderful. Great overview of our work internationally, and we'll dig in a bit more here with our panel discussions. So we're going to move to Dr. Claude Coutu from Côte d'Ivoire to hear more about what his team has been learning and working on. So Claude, I think you have screen sharing permissions. Do you have slides to share today? I know he was here before. Martin, do you know if he's
I think
here?
he's actually just frozen, Danielle.
Uh-oh.
Oh, he's back. He's
Oh, he's
back.
back. He's back. He's back. Okay. Claude, do you have slides to share next?
Ok. Alors, bonjour, c'est à moi la Côte d'Ivoire?
Yes.
Oui. Bonjour. Bon, j'ai pas compris. Tout était en anglais, j'ai pas compris.
Yes.
Alors, Alors, je vais vous présenter le travail que nous avons fait en Côte d'Ivoire. Hier, j'ai envoyé un document à Iona. Je ne sais pas si elle peut partager, si vous l'avez déjà. À défaut, je vais vous faire un résumé de ce que je lui ai envoyé comme document. Alors, j'ai proposé de vous parler de ce projet en Côte d'Ivoire, qui est un projet important pour nous. Merci, Yona. Merci, Yona. Alors, la première diapo présente la Côte d'Ivoire en Afrique, pays de l'Afrique de l'Ouest. Je sais que parmi vous, beaucoup ne connaissent pas la Côte d'Ivoire. La semaine prochaine, on sera heureux d'accueillir Martin et les autres en Côte d'Ivoire dans 2 semaines. Ils pourront, n'est-ce pas, voir de visu ce que nous sommes. Alors, diapo suivante. D'accord. Alors, depuis bientôt une année, tout le monde le sait, la Côte d'Ivoire, à l'instar de ces autres pays, participe à un important projet sur, n'est-ce pas, les cercles d'apprentissage et l'évaluation formative. Alors, il faut savoir que ce projet, il est important pour nous parce que dans la majorité des pays francophones, l'accent a été mis depuis les indépendances sur l'évaluation, n'est-ce pas, sommative, sur l'évaluation sommative, au détriment de l'évaluation formative. Les enseignants, dans leur formation initiale, n'est-ce pas, ont, n'est-ce pas, été formés suffisamment sur l'évaluation sommative au détriment de l'évaluation formative. Et c'est l'une des raisons pour lesquelles ce projet vient à point nommé, parce que nous savons que l'évaluation formative intervient à la fin de chaque tâche d'apprentissage, contrairement à l'évaluation sommative qui se fait, n'est-ce pas, à la fin d'un processus. Alors, il y en a diapo. Donc, ce projet, il vient à point nommé pour combler les déficits, les insuffisances qui ont été constatées avec l'évaluation, n'est-ce pas, sommative. Et majoritairement, nos enseignants dans le primaire ont été formés sur quoi? L'évaluation sommative. Il y a eu des bribes d'informations, n'est-ce pas, sur l'évaluation formative, mais il y a suffisamment d'insuffisance à ce niveau. Alors, ce projet vient à point nommé parce qu'il vise à renforcer les compétences des enseignants dans ce domaine-là. Parce que nous avons vu également, à travers ce projet, ce que cela apporte aux enseignants, n'est-ce pas, dans les classes et ce que cela apporte également aux élèves en termes de résultats. Alors, si la Côte d'Ivoire a accepté de participer à ce projet, comment il a été organisé de façon pratique? Quelles sont les activités que nous avons réalisées et quelles sont les difficultés que nous avons observées entre l'évaluation formative et l'évaluation sommative qui se pratiquait antérieurement? Et comment est-ce que nous avons pu contourner ces difficultés pour que nous puissions implémenter ce projet-là, n'est-ce pas, en Côte d'Ivoire? Diapo suivante. Alors, en Côte d'Ivoire, vu l'importance de ce projet, avant même d'entrer dans le vif du sujet, nous avons mis une organisation en place. Nous avons structuré notre activité à partir du ministère. Le ministère a été fortement impliqué dans ce projet et le ministère a désigné une des directions pour nous accompagner dans le processus. En l'occurrence, la direction de la veille et du suivi des programmes. Parce que dans notre objectif, nous voulions que l'évaluation formative intègre aussi bien la formation initiale des enseignants et la formation continue et qu'elle prenne toute sa place dans le processus d'apprentissage dans nos écoles. Donc, nous avons mis en place une structure qui est chapeautée par le ministère à travers la direction de la veille. Ensuite, le SINEFSI, le syndicat qui est partenaire de l'IE dans ce projet. Et puis, en dessous du syndicat, nous avons le consultant national qui a été recruté et qui travaille en étroite ligne avec, n'est-ce pas, l'équipe internationale du projet qui permet d'avoir les directives, les documents, les outils à implémenter sur le terrain. Et puis, exactement, les superviseurs, encore nous avons des superviseurs qui sont l'interface entre nous, équipe projet, et puis, n'est-ce pas, les inspections, les directions de l'éducation pour faciliter, n'est-ce pas, la présence des enseignants à nos différentes activités par rapport à ce projet. Et puis, juste en dessous, il y a les cercles d'apprentissage, les 3 cercles d'apprentissage qui ont été choisis par le syndicat et avec lesquels nous travaillons. Alors, pour que nous soyons cohérents avec nous-mêmes, nous avons élaboré un calendrier de rencontres et un calendrier d'activités avec l'équipe internationale. Donc, cette équipe internationale-là nous a demandé quelles sont, n'est-ce pas, les dates qui nous permettront de conduire le projet jusqu'à son terme. Vous remarquerez que nous avons toutes nos dates, ce sont les mercredis. Mais pourquoi les mercredis? Parce que le système éducatif en Côte d'Ivoire, les mercredis, ce sont des demi-journées. Alors, il est plus facile à un responsable, un inspecteur de l'éducation nationale, de libérer ses enseignants le mercredi que de les libérer un autre jour où ils perdraient toute la journée. Donc, nous avons élaboré notre calendrier en tenant compte également des dates des examens à grand tirage, si bien que l'ensemble de nos activités ont été prévues jusqu'au mois de mai, avant quoi, les examens à grand tirage pour lesquels les enseignants sont fortement sollicités. Donc, nous avons mené différentes activités et avant chaque rencontre, avant chaque activité, nous avions le mercredi qui précède une réunion avec l'équipe internationale pour que nous ayons la même compréhension des activités à mener et pour que sur le terrain, le message puisse passer facilement. Donc, c'est ce calendrier que nous avons arrêté, qui a été partagé également aux responsables des enseignants pour qu'ils aient un chronogramme d'activité et ils puissent libérer, n'est-ce pas, les participants chaque fois qu'on a besoin d'eux. Alors, ça nous a permis de faire des ateliers de formation, des tutoriels et puis des activités en réseau. Diapo. Il y en a diapo suivante. Alors, les activités de formation se sont déroulées avec les enseignants, n'est-ce pas, sur la base des outils confectionnés par l'équipe internationale du projet. Chaque activité avait n'est-ce pas, ses outils bien déterminés. Et ces outils-là ont permis de constater, n'est-ce pas, les problèmes que nos enseignants rencontraient avec l'évaluation, n'est-ce pas, sommative. Et ces outils-là leur ont permis d'avoir une meilleure connaissance et un meilleur ancrage, une meilleure utilisation de l'évaluation formative. Donc, chez nous, la plupart des difficultés liées à l'usage de l'évaluation formative sont liées au fait que dans la formation initiale de nos enseignants, l'accent a été mis beaucoup plus sur l'évaluation sommative, alors qu'on s'est rendu compte que c'est l'évaluation formative qui donne de meilleurs résultats. Donc, il y a eu des séances de formation, il y a eu des tutoriels où les enseignants qui participent à ce projet ont échangé avec d'autres enseignants, n'est-ce pas, pour leur porter le message, pour leur partager ce qu'ils apprennent dans les cercles d'apprentissage et pour leur partager, n'est-ce pas, leur vision, n'est-ce pas, du travail enseignant par rapport aux résultats, n'est-ce pas, qu'ils ont pu obtenir. Diapo suivante. En dehors des formations et des tutoriels, nous avons eu également des activités en réseau, diapo, il y en a diapo, des activités en réseau. Ces activités en réseau ont été fort utiles parce que lors de ces activités, nous ne gardons pas la même structure, c'est-à-dire que les membres d'un cercle d'apprentissage, n'est-ce pas, se mettent avec les membres des autres cercles d'apprentissage. Donc, nous faisons une recomposition des acteurs. Cela permet de savoir, n'est-ce pas, qu'est-ce qui a été fait dans un cercle d'apprentissage, qu'est-ce qui n'a pas été fait dans un autre, comment est-ce qu'on peut se renforcer mutuellement pour que chacun des acteurs soit au même niveau de compréhension que les autres. Alors, si cette image-là, vous voyez une activité qui est en train d'être menée à travers des activités en réseau, les membres qui sont présents ici sont issus des différents cercles d'apprentissage. Et nous faisons des recompositions, n'est-ce pas, pour que, n'est-ce pas, tout le monde soit formé de la même façon et que le message qui est véhiculé soit le même pour chacun des acteurs afin que l'implémentation en classe donne des meilleurs résultats. Et sur la diapo d'à côté, nous avons vu nous voyons ici le ministère à travers le directeur de la veille qui est venu, qui vient régulièrement à nos séances pour encourager les participants, donner la vision du ministère, n'est-ce pas, montrer l'importance de ce projet-là pour la Côte d'Ivoire. Et je vous assure que sa présence a été fort remarquée et fort appréciée. Et vous avez là le syndicat, le ministère et les acteurs ministériels qui nous ont toujours accompagnés dans ce projet-là. Ça montre quoi? La détermination des acteurs pour ce projet et, n'est-ce pas, les attentes que le ministère a vis-à-vis de ce projet. Diapo suivante. Diapo suivante, il y en a. Donc, nous avons mené l'ensemble des activités et pour voir les acquis de ce projet, il est bon, n'est-ce pas, de recueillir l'avis, n'est-ce pas, de nos participants. Cet avis a été motivé dans les vignettes qui sont amenées à l'équipe internationale. Et les vignettes, dans les vignettes, chacun des participants exprime les acquis de ce projet-là. Et les témoignages sont édifiants parce qu'ils permettent de voir ce que les participants disent entre l'évaluation sommative et l'évaluation formative. Les acquis de ce projet sont indéniables dans la mesure où même ceux qui ne sont pas membres des cercles d'apprentissage sont fortement intéressés, n'est-ce pas, à participer à ce projet. Et on nous demande comment est-ce que nous allons l'étendre à d'autres établissements, comment est-ce que nous allons l'étendre à des localités beaucoup plus éloignées d'Abidjan pour qu'un nombre beaucoup plus important d'enseignants puissent participer. Parce que dans les résultats, les acquis sont nets. Les acquis sont indéniables.
Une minute, Claude.
D'accord?
Une minute.
D'accord, sont indéniables et qui montrent que ce projet-là a permis d'avoir une meilleure connaissance de l'évaluation formative et de ses résultats. Diapo, je vais aller vite. Diapo, mais néanmoins, il est bon de rappeler, diapo précédente, que nous avons eu quelques difficultés, n'est-ce pas? Nous avons eu des difficultés à implémenter. Parce que d'abord, les enseignants, pour mobiliser les enseignants, ça n'a pas été évident parce que par rapport à des projets antérieurs dont les retombées n'ont pas été implémentées à l'école, beaucoup d'enseignants se sont dit, mais c'est les mêmes projets qui viennent. Est-ce qu'on va pouvoir les utiliser dans nos activités? Nous avons eu également quelques difficultés pour concilier le calendrier scolaire avec, n'est-ce pas, la présence des enseignants. Nous avons eu également des problèmes au niveau de la connexion, au niveau de la traduction des documents qui étaient en anglais, et dont la traduction n'a pas toujours été facile. Évidemment, nous avons eu des problèmes de connexion, n'est-ce pas? Mais nous avons apporté des solutions à toutes ces choses-là, si bien que nous avons pu réaliser l'ensemble des activités qui étaient prévues pour cette année-là, jusqu'à leur terme. Et nous avons même fait les évaluations, n'est-ce pas, à partir des documents qui nous ont été amenés pour que chacun se situe par rapport à ce projet-là. Alors, j'ai tellement de choses à dire sur ce projet, mais comme le temps qui m'est imparti arrive à sa fin, je vais m'arrêter là et puis éventuellement, s'il y a des questions, je pourrai revenir. Merci encore.
Hey, wonderful. Thank you so much, Claude. It was really exciting to hear everything you've learned so far. We're going to move on to Ana Maria Clementino, one of our Learning Circle facilitators from Brazil. And Ana Maria, do you have slides that you'd like to share?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I share or Iona?
Iona, does Ana Maria have permissions?
Yes, you should have permission.
Yes, you should have permissions.
Just a minute. Can you see that?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Danielle.
Yes.
Hello, everyone. I would like to thank the invitation of Education International to participate in the webinar and say that I feel very honored to represent the team of the Teacher-Led Brazil. I share, in my brief talk, I will try to share a little about the experience of Brazil, share a bit of experience, Brazil experience. What are the learning circles demonstrating? About the formative assessment, we observed the teacher before the beginning of the learning circles had little or not knowledge about the formative assessment. The teacher's reports show how much initial teacher training in schools are guided by large-scale evaluation policies, and how used they were to conduct the practices by summative evaluations and outcome policy, which in a way reflects a little of the evaluation culture in Brazil and also globally. Brazil has an education quality indicator called IDEB, which is measured by the performance of students in Portuguese language and mathematical tests that make up the basic education evaluation system. This has often led teachers and schools to teach for tests. The learning circles have helped them to reflect on other forms of assessment, which take into account the entire education process and not only the results, which are not punitive and which offer instruments for the student to understand their own learning process. The learning circles have provided reflection of teachers on the practice. For example, some teachers in their development work on formative assessment have tried to deconstruct the idea of error and the practice. The teachers have been working in a new perspective, try to observe what the error reveals as the student is thinking and use it as a start point. Despite the teachers' initial doubts about the creation of new practices from the perspective of formative assessment, they have realized that we not talk about complex strategies. They can be something that they already practice and that they were not aware of, knowledge that until then they have not systematized. In the circles, we notice the teachers that realize that unlike a standardized assessment, formative assessment is the evaluation that contemplates diversity, as an indigenous teacher pointed out in one of the workshops. And the presence of teachers, indigenous teachers, and Quilombola teachers in the circles, for example, brings the issue of diversity to the debate, draws attention to the importance of taking into account the heterogeneity of the students and classrooms in the evaluation process, and how standardized and large-scale assessment do not bear the difference. Learning circles have been constituted as true learning communities in Brazil, and knowledge has not been restricted to the group of teachers or the classroom, but being shared and debated and disseminated in schools and even in the Department of Education. A small big step that can help change the mindset of teachers, schools, and the Department of Education on evaluation practices. Finally, I would like to highlight that the circles in Brazil are still in progress. The project starting in February and will be finalized in December this year. They are being carried out remotely through the Zoom platform to encompass a more diverse group of teachers. But recently, we have the opportunity to meet in person the participants of the learning circles in a seminar held in the city of Brasilia. It was an important moment to deepen on the theme of formative assessment, as well as for exchange of experience and maturation of the work developed by teachers. Teachers were even more motivating to continue to the project. I believe that the teacher-led project Brazil will bear great fruit for us to think new strategies on evaluation from the point of view of teachers. It's not our intention to put responsibility and change the system on the teachers. In Brazil, teachers and students still face many precarious schools contexts. Therefore, in addition to change in the practice, teachers also need support, continued education, better work conditions, and the set pay, which will only be achieved through public policy. Hence, the importance of working together with national and local governments. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ana Maria. It was really exciting to hear about your work so far, and we'll look forward to your next steps and next insights. So we'll move now to Gabriela Arbeleche from Uruguay, and Gabriela is a project union partner.
Sorry, just a minute.
That's okay. Gabriela, do you have slides that you'd like to share as well?
No, buenos días. Muchas
Hello.
gracias por este espacio. Nosotros comenzamos en una etapa muy posterior al resto. Recién hace un par de meses que estamos en este proceso. Entendemos que es fundamental que se pueda intercambiar, conocer la realidad de otros países y también que otros países conozcan la realidad que se está viviendo en el Uruguay. A diferencia de los planteos que vienen haciendo los compañeros, en Uruguay desde el año 2007, en Uruguay desde el año 2007 existe la evaluación formativa con ítems elaborados por docentes de aula, que fue ajustándose en un proceso que comenzó primero donde todos aplicaban de la misma forma, luego se fue ajustando a que pudieran seleccionar los ítems que se aplicaban en la prueba. Esto generó la posibilidad de que el docente pudiera, de acuerdo a las respuestas que había recibido de sus alumnos, trabajar desde el error, trabajar desde las diferentes respuestas que se habían dado, y esto genera claramente una mayor posibilidad de generar mejores aprendizajes para los alumnos, y en eso compartimos totalmente con lo planteado por Carol Campbell en cuanto a defender la calidad de los aprendizajes, y también el liderazgo de los docentes en el sentido de que también había salas que eran pagas para que los docentes pudieran intercambiar y pudieran trabajar sobre esos resultados que iban obteniendo y cómo los avances que hacían con respecto al trabajo posterior que hacían en la aplicación de estas evaluaciones que se hacían por intermedio del plan, o sea, de las computadoras que otorgaba Plan Ceibal, permitían realmente una forma que cambió mucho la evaluación que se estaba haciendo en el Uruguay y las posibilidades de intercambio de los docentes entre sí y con los niños. Y claramente apuntaba a mejorar los aprendizajes porque era mucho más fácil para el docente detectar cuáles eran los nudos, las dificultades que tenía cada uno de sus alumnos, y desde allí poder trabajar en mejorar las condiciones de aprendizaje. ¿Y por qué estoy hablando en pasado? Estoy hablando en pasado porque a partir del año 2020, con el cambio de gobierno, esto se dejó de lado y se volvió a un sistema totalmente piramidal, donde el docente vuelve a ser un aplicador de las políticas educativas, de los programas que se están imponiendo, donde ya no tienen participación en nada, y entonces nos parece sumamente valioso poder rescatar en esta instancia, junto al Internacional de la Educación, y que el sindicato pueda llevar adelante esta investigación para que se pueda ver cómo los docentes pueden aportar y construir juntos desde los aprendizajes que fueron adquiriendo con los años y que en este momento lamentablemente hemos perdido esas posibilidades. Comenzamos el proceso con algunas dificultades porque, como también comentó otro compañero, las traducciones han hecho que se dificultara lo que se comprendía en cuanto al material que nos había llegado, pero ya, bueno, ya recibieron los facilitadores su formación, ya se conformaron los equipos de trabajo, ya tuvieron las primeras instancias de encuentro, donde han podido ir construyendo materiales que evidencian esos procesos, y es de intención del Uruguay claramente poder llegar al mes de noviembre con un producto terminado. ¿Por qué en tan poco tiempo entendemos que va a ser posible hacerlo? Porque justamente tenemos una historia recorrida en esto, tenemos una historia que entendemos que era sumamente valiosa y como lamentablemente en este momento la hemos perdido, entendemos que este es un camino para volver a retomarla y que sea desde el lado de los sindicatos, donde se pueda mantener para luego poder expandirla y ojalá en algún momento o en el próximo cambio de gobierno, que va a ser en el año 2025, exista la posibilidad de retomar esas formas de trabajo que claramente permitían un real intercambio entre pares de docentes y un real intercambio con los niños para mejorar las condiciones de aprendizaje, para que ellos mismos pudieran detectar cuáles eran sus equivocaciones, sus errores, y desde ahí construir el aprendizaje en una forma mucho más clara y sostenible, porque claramente desde allí es donde se construye el real aprendizaje, el que no se olvida ni se memoriza. Lamentablemente en este proceso de regresión que tenemos, entendemos que juega un papel fundamental la Internacional de la Educación, permitiendo que Uruguay sea parte de esta construcción y permitiendo mostrar lo que se ha hecho durante tanto tiempo, y bueno, y que aquellos docentes más jóvenes puedan participar también para involucrarse, porque son los que no han vivido esos otros momentos donde realmente teníamos un avance importante en esto y donde todos participaban. Por último, bueno, claramente entendemos que es fundamental problematizar las prácticas, que exista ese intercambio entre los docentes, que no se vuelva al sistema piramidal donde el directivo es quien establece qué y cómo se debe enseñar, y donde ni los docentes ni los niños sean reconocidos, y es por este motivo que el Uruguay ha asumido este compromiso. Por el momento creo que es lo que tengo para aportar, y estamos abiertos a todas las sugerencias que entiendan pertinentes. Muchas gracias.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Gabriela. It's great to connect, and welcome to the project. And finally, we'll hear from Hansu Wang from South Korea, and he is also a project union partner. So Hansu, do you have slides that you'd like to share, or will you just speak? Yes.
Yes,
Slide.
I have. Yeah, I
Okay.
have my slide.
Okay.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Hello, everybody. My name is Hansu Hwang. I'm from South Korea and the Korean Teachers Union. I'm really honored to be here with you today. So before my presentation, I would like to share one thing with you, what is happening in South Korea in education sector. especially in education sector. So yesterday, September 4th, was the historic day of teachers' uprising in South Korean history. So more than 1,000 teachers, they left. They came out of the school and they took the street, and we was protesting against the government. Also, we was remembering the dead teacher who killed herself 1.5 months ago. So she is a very young teacher, and so she was bullied by the parents and also students. So she killed herself, and so it was the kind of trigger, and it was kind of the last straw that broke the camel's back. So teachers really got angry, and so they became to know how vulnerable they are as a teachers in South Korea. So now teachers are really angry, and so they are shouting their voices. So the reason why I'm talking about this is today's topic is related to this kind of things. So it can be about the teacher leadership. So in South Korea, teachers are not treated as leaders so far. So it is very vulnerable. Their status is really vulnerable, and so we can be easily attacked by parents and government and the Ministry of Education. So now the teachers are realizing the situation. That's why teachers are gathering and mobilized, and so we are shouting our voices in public. Okay, so let's move on to today's topic. Of course, in this fighting, the Education International's unwavering support and solidarity. So if you are interested in this case, and so you can read the article on Education International website. Also, you can find several newses, international newses about the Korean teachers uprising. Okay, it happened yesterday, so that's why I wanted to sharing this with you. Okay, let's move on to today's topic, the formative assessment practices around the world, what works and what doesn't. So my colleagues before, so they talked a lot about this project. So some things are overlap. The from the Cote d'Ivoire, so the professor told many things. It's almost the same. So same module in South Korean participants, we are using the same module of this project. Okay, so I would like to introduce to the Korean team. The Korean researcher is her name is Sun Kim, the professor in Chungnam University. She is one of renowned professors in South Korea on process-centered assessment. So, and she is our researcher. And then there are 3 learning circles. So from 3 provinces. South Korea has 17 provinces. So among them, 3 provinces are joining this project. One is Gyeongnam, 2 facilitators and 10 teachers, and Jeonbuk is one of the provinces, and then Jeju. And Korean Teachers and Education Workers Union is the union partner. And so we are working together since 2020 with the international team and Education International and HeartScan. Okay, next. So the three learning circles, they're working together, and then we met for the first time in February this year. It was the first national network event, so we introduced ourselves in front of the lecture room, and so we worked together, and so we talked about this project. And then in each sector that they are working together according to the modules and the tools. There are 30 tools, and so they, as Koto mentioned, so there are 10 workshops and 2 tutorial times that they are doing now. I heard that there are the 7 tools that they are working on, 7 tools. So they talk about what a formative assessment test is, and what is the difference between the formative assessment and test and formative assessment and summative assessment or something, and how to introduce the good practice into their classrooms, their learning setting. Okay, so and then next, the national network event was held in last month, August. So we met together, and so all teachers, we had a time to share what is happening in their classroom. So we shared what is the difficulties in this project, also what is good points in this project. So we shared those things together in this second national network event. Okay, you are watching the photos in on the second national network event. So as a union partner, so I'm observing this project, and I observing how this project is going, and then so from this project, so the learning circle, teachers learning circles can be a new culture for teacher professional development. So in the past, especially in the South Korean settings, the teachers, there are no teachers learning circles, just the education ministry controls everything. So the teachers just follow the education ministry or education office's orders. So, but now in schools, there are many learning circles. So we want to work together and collectively, and not isolated. This is the main purpose of the learning circles. And Korean education settings, the atmosphere, the top-down approach was really prevailing, always top-down. So teachers are trained to follow, just to follow. But it's now changing. Also, this project, teacher-led learning circles, the teacher should take a lead in this program, in this project. So it can be a challenge. Also, it can be a very good benefit, because some teachers it's really difficult, because they said it's really difficult because they are very trained, they are very accustomed to following the education ministry orders. So now, but this project is totally different from the old style approach. Our teacher said in the second national network event, so of course there are some difficulties in the beginning. They don't understand what they should do, and so they didn't understand. So they told us, and in the beginning it was really difficult. But as time passes by, they started to learn the meaning of the teacher-led, and so what they have to do in the classroom. Also, some teachers said so they can give confidence to students by giving good positive feedbacks and praises. And so one teacher talked, it is time to think about the overall assessment through this project. So as you know, so teachers, we already have a assessment, formative assessment, process-centered assessment, or the summative assessment. But in this project, so we started to rethink about the ongoing assessment, also lesson planning and developing. Okay, so the teacher said that the importance of the feedback through this project, and one teacher started a new learning circle in their own schools. Of course, the circle is not related to this project, but she is affected. She was encouraged to make this teacher circle with the co-teachers in their school. So they are talking about the lesson plan, and so they are sharing their teaching practices, or something like this. Also, one teacher said, so through this project, she can get more close to the students. So she can get more close to watch the students. Okay, so before finish, and so I would like to say about the Korean Okay, so this is the Korean education and the setting. So education superintendent is really important. The red is the conservatives and blue is progressive. So now the situation is changing because of the last year's election. So it is a very unique system. So every 4 years the education superintendents are elected by the vote. And now the conservatives are getting bigger and bigger. And so some provinces they started to reintroduce the high stakes standardized testing in their region. So it is really bad testing. So we are opposing to this testing. And so in this moment, I think so the formative assessment project is really important. So we can say that so the standardized testing is bad. So because these pictures can see the results of the high stakes standardized testing. So students, this is the situation, but we don't want this kind of education. So this project is the very good timing now. So teachers should lead, and teacher unions also should lead in the education sector. So we are learning a lot from this project. So we didn't finish yet. So the process is going on. And then in the end, so we can share more with you. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Hyun-Soo. That was really inspiring to hear. At this point, we'll move on to take questions for our panelists or for Carol. And you can ask questions by raising your hand, or you can type a question into the chat. And Iona and possibly Andra will help me just make sure that we get to as many questions as we can. So do we have any questions for our panelists or Carol about the learning circles model, formative assessment practices, challenges, and how they're being navigated? Okay. Oh, okay. So I think we have Odile. Would you like to ask your question?
Bonjour, je vais parler en français. Tout d'abord, merci aux panélistes pour leur présentation des différents contextes nationaux et de la mise en œuvre de ce projet relatif aux pratiques d'évaluation formative. Avec évidemment une promotion assez forte de ce que vous appelez les cercles d'apprentissage. Alors, j'ai deux questions à la fois pour les camarades syndicalistes enseignants et les collègues qui sont chercheurs et universitaires. Tout d'abord, première question, quels ont été les critères qui ont présidé au choix des 7 pays? Est-ce que cela a été fait uniquement avec l'objectif d'avoir les différentes régions de l'international de l'éducation représentées dans ce projet, ou bien est-ce qu'il y avait de la part des organisations qui sont impliquées dans le travail, une réflexion déjà importante sur ces cercles d'apprentissage? Et ma deuxième question, c'est une interrogation générale. Ce qui m'a frappé dans les différentes prises de parole, c'est le fait que personne n'a expliqué de façon plus intense en quoi ces cercles d'apprentissage permettaient aux enseignants de reprendre la main sur leur travail en tant que transmetteur de connaissances, en tant que leur capacité à opérer des choix pédagogiques afin d'améliorer les conditions d'apprentissage de leurs élèves. Personne n'a vraiment mentionné cela, mais je pense pourtant que c'est une dimension de réflexion importante. Et je terminerai en disant que, d'après ce que j'ai entendu, et ce qui me paraît assez positif, c'est que vous avez présenté les cercles d'apprentissage comme un exercice de véritable liberté pédagogique. Ce qu'on appelle en anglais academic freedom, l'autonomie professionnelle. Et je pense que c'est aussi une dimension sur laquelle l'international de l'éducation a beaucoup travaillé parce que l'IE et ses organisations membres partout dans le monde savent très très bien que cette liberté pédagogique, cette autonomie professionnelle, c'est aussi le socle, un des socles les plus importants du statut de la profession enseignante partout dans le monde. Voilà. Merci d'avance pour vos réponses et merci en tout état de cause pour les présentations. J'ai oublié de dire que je suis de France, du SNES-FSU, Syndicat national des enseignements du second degré.
Okay, these are wonderful questions, Odile, and I think you'll hear specifics about this in our next webinar. And Martin, did you want to briefly say why the countries were chosen to the first part?
Yeah, sure. So Adil, of the countries, Brazil, Colombia, which actually was switched for Uruguay. I won't go into the details around that at the moment. Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana and Switzerland are all countries that are target countries for the Jacobs project. We insisted on adding 2 from South Korea, and we're lucky enough to get the agreement of from Asia Pacific, sorry, to get the agreement of South Korea and Malaysia, who are working very cooperatively together. Well, because we've got 4 questions left, we'll keep it brief. If we hear all the questions, Danielle, and then we can have a very quick sum up from the panelists.
Okay, that's perfect. Thanks, Martin. Okay, so John, could we, we'll take your question next quickly and then move on to Juana.
Surely. Thanks very much, Danielle. John McGaughan, from the Teachers Union of Ireland. We represent lecturers in third level colleges and second level teachers. And what I'm interested in finding out is the extent to which the pressures that arise in post-primary teaching, where there is usually a very significant emphasis on high stakes summative assessment, whether that influence has been an obstacle in relation to the project. In other words, have primary teachers, I suppose put crudely, have they enjoyed the support and understanding of, or have they found, if you like, resistance from post-primary teachers, where the predominant systems in most states, I think, probably are favor summative assessments. And the other point I just wondered about was whether or not the resources, I think, that Dr. Campbell mentioned, inclusive in particular of time for this, whether those resources, and in particular time for this project, have been generously provided by national authorities and or by local school management.
Wonderful. Thank you, John. Those questions are noted, and we'll take Juana's questions now.
Sí, reciban un saludo fraterno de nuestro secretario general, el maestro Alfonso Cepeda Salas, secretario general del Sindicato Nacional de Trabajadores de la Educación en México. Pues felicitamos a la Internacional de la Educación por abanderar este tema de gran importancia para los aprendizajes de los alumnos, pero también para el liderazgo de los docentes. Rápidamente comentarles que en México actualmente estamos iniciando un nuevo paradigma en los procesos educativos, en donde el punto medular tiene que ver con la autonomía profesional ya establecida, como esa libertad, esa posibilidad de codiseñar los programas educativos para los alumnos. Entonces, esta gran oportunidad justamente coincide con este tema que ustedes nos dan esta posibilidad de que conozcamos. Y en este sentido, bueno, existe aquí pues falta de información porque recientemente apenas está iniciando. Y yo diría dos preguntas para quienes ya han tenido la oportunidad de aplicar. Lo primero, ¿cuáles han sido los mayores desafíos? Hablo de formación de docentes desde las instituciones en donde se forman, que ahí tendría que trabajarse con este modelo de evaluación formativa. Y el otro punto, en el desarrollo profesional, ¿ha sido suficiente con estos círculos de estudio para que los maestros se apropien de esta forma de evaluación, dado que en la mayoría de nuestros países la evaluación sumativa es la que prevalece? Y por último, ¿cuál es el papel que desempeñan las organizaciones sindicales en este trabajo? Entendemos que están liderando con la autoridad educativa, pero ¿hasta dónde se les permite participar? ¿Son las organizaciones sindicales quienes se encargan de estos círculos de estudio o aportan recursos o cuál es el papel? Muchas gracias.
Okay, fantastic. And now we'll take question from Luke.
Oui, bonjour. Je suis Luc Allaire, je suis le secrétaire général du Comité syndical francophone d'éducation et de la formation, le CSFEF, et aussi responsable des relations internationales à la CSQ au Québec. Ma question s'adresse à Claude Coutou. Il n'a pas eu le temps de présenter la dernière diapositive où il y avait les avantages. Il avait présenté les difficultés du projet, mais il n'a pas présenté la dernière diapositive qui semblait être les points positifs du projet. Et j'aimerais savoir s'il est possible qu'il nous reviennent là, sur ces points positifs-là, parce que je pense que ce serait important de le savoir aussi. Merci.
Excellent. And we have Helen.
Merci. Bonsoir à tout le monde. Je voudrais joindre ma voix pour féliciter les intervenants par rapport à la formation, à l'évaluation formative. Mais je voudrais, comme Luc l'a dit, j'attendais les avantages aussi de la part du camarade Claude. Et je voudrais aussi savoir quelle est la suite à donner par rapport à nos États, parce qu'il a dit que le ministre, la direction de veille suivait les travaux. Mais c'est un projet. Et tout le monde a donné les acquis et les bénéfices de cette évaluation. Alors, quelle est la suite à donner? Est-ce que le gouvernement ou les États s'engagent à poursuivre, à prendre le relais de ce projet au cas où ça arrive à prendre terme? Ou alors, les syndicats même s'engagent. Alors, je voudrais voir quelle est la suite à donner par rapport au projet au cas où les bénéfices sont là. Merci.
Okay, and we'll take our, I believe, final question from Jacques.
Bonjour à tout le monde. D'abord, je commence par féliciter le présentateur pour les exposés qui sont très pertinents. J'ai des petites préoccupations. La première, c'est que on a parlé des évaluations, que ce soit formatives, sommatives, mais on sait souvent que les évaluations ont toujours généré la peur avant. Je n'ai pas entendu dans le projet comment est-ce qu'on peut faire en sorte de chasser la peur dans le chef des élèves, des apprenants, pour leur permettre de passer les évaluations, que ce soit sommatives ou formatives, dans une bonne attitude. Parce que souvent, la peur devient un obstacle et ça ne permet pas aux apprenants de vomir, quoi, de donner le mieux de soi-même comme obstacle. Comment, je n'ai pas entendu cela dans le projet. Est-ce que quelqu'un peut nous essayer d'expliquer vraiment en long, en large? La deuxième préoccupation, c'est concernant les cercles d'apprentissage. Nous savons tous que les projets ont toujours un timing et des limites. Mais est-ce que le cercle vient totalement remplacer ou bien ça devient au fait un opérateur de recherche pour pousser les gouvernements à changer leur politique éducative? Ou bien c'est juste un projet et que le projet va se limiter, et on constate, on va aussi voir que ça va se limiter là-bas. Est-ce qu'il n'y a pas moyen d'élasticer ça, d'étendre ça pour que les gouvernements prennent en charge ces cercles d'apprentissage et que dans les systèmes éducatifs, on essaye d'incorporer tout ce qu'il y a comme recherche qui sort de là, le résultat, et de permettre les choses d'avancer. Voilà mes deux petites préoccupations. Merci beaucoup.
Wonderful. It's so exciting to hear all of these questions. And I think because of where we're at with time, Martin has suggested we go to Carol for a brief response to the questions that we've heard. And then we could possibly share some of the PowerPoint materials that our panelists have shared today for continued reflection and conversation before Martin and I wrap up. So Carol, we'll just pass to you for some synthesis and thoughts on the questions that have been posed.
Thanks very much, Daniela. And I am conscious that there were some specific questions for Claude, but I recognize our time constraint. I'll start with the last question, which was, sort of what next, and will this actually inform continuation? And I think that is a central purpose of the research. The teacher-led learning circles takes together what we know from previous research about effective professional development and leadership into design with what we know about effective formative assessment. And now we're trying it, well, you are trying it out in all of these different contexts. And I was just struck today by how powerful those presentations were. So thank you to the panelists and the images of the teachers and some of the resources. So thinking about what this really looks like in practice and in different contexts. We're optimistic that we will have strong evidence, and I think that's clear today, and that will be part of what becomes advocacy around support for, some of you are talking about professional freedom, the importance of time, absolutely. So in this model, teachers participate in 7 workshops over a school year. Now, that's not what all professional development looks like. So how do we begin to prove that this type of professional development and formative assessment are successful? And yes, take away the fear of assessment, because this should not only be teacher-led, it should be engaging students in their own learning in a way that is not fearful. So I want to be brief and respectful of all of the other speakers. It was wonderful to hear from you all. I don't think I've got time to answer all of the questions, Danielle, so maybe I'll hand back to you and Martin to let you wrap up, however you want to do that.
Okay, that's beautiful. Thank you.
Anybody that wants to contact me, my email address is available.
Thanks, Carol. And thank you all. This is clearly the start of a bigger conversation, and it's so exciting to hear and see the interest and engagement in the project. I'm just going to quickly share some of the themes I noted as I was listening, and then pass to Martin for a close. So it was very exciting to hear about the global readiness for formative assessment, for teacher professional learning about formative assessment, and as well teacher leadership. So shifting away from a focus on summative assessment and large-scale assessment, and also away from top-down professional learning models where teachers have more voice, more agency. Very exciting to hear about positive impacts of formative assessment and the teacher-led learning circles on both students and teachers. those relationships building between teachers and students, student learning benefiting, teacher practice benefiting, and the spread, regardless of what stage of the project teachers are in. We're already seeing spread to their colleagues within their schools and beyond, which is amazing, and that will sustain the learning of this project beyond the parameters of our 3-year specific project that we're working on right now. And the need to adapt the professional learning model based on diverse countries, school and classroom contexts, participants' needs and goals, access to technology, political conditions, and the fact that we're collaboratively navigating the challenges that we experience. And those are many of the questions that came up as well. So that collaboration is obviously extending beyond the project to this group and continued people who are engaged in these webinars and with our materials that we've developed for the project. So the literature review, research framework, and additional information that you can find on the project website. So I'll pass to Martin, and thank you all from me. Martin.
Thanks, Danielle, and désolé, Claude Coutu, because I understand that you had a question that we haven't had time to give you the floor for. We are going to follow up on this with Luc Allaire in Côte d'Ivoire, and we will make sure that there are more opportunities to share this information. On that note, I want to draw all of your attention to the next webinar in this series, which is on the 3rd of October. And there we will be hearing from David Frost and his team about the support given for the facilitators and how the facilitators operate those learning circles. Anna here is such a facilitator, and we will have more of a conversation around that happens and what happens in those circles. I do want to note 2 other things. Odile and John touched on this. Professional autonomy is at the center and the heart of this work. If we do not stand as strong and professional teachers, we are not able to deal with the issues that Hyun-Soo has brought to us from South Korea. This is something that we must do together, and we must do with solidarity. And it is very clear from the responses we've had around this webinar that all of you draw strength from each other, and that all of you are able to understand the ways in which we build our understanding. And I have to say that for Education International, to get our feet into the classrooms this way has been a particular delight, and it is at a critical time, and it is influencing the work we do elsewhere. I know Carol is working with the high-level panel, and we have other work going on to uplift the status of teachers. And we do have a new status of teachers, which will be out very soon. John Bangs is steering that particular ship, but it is just docked, and we have a very good response rate and some very powerful messages. They speak into this area. We will make sure we continue this formative assessment discussion, and that we keep you all in the waka, to use a New Zealand phrase, which means in the canoe. Thank you all for your time, for your effort, for your focus, and for your interest. And we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar. Write it in your diaries, 3rd of October, same time, same place. We'll see you all then. And thank you for your participation.